If you never take time to understand your enemy, how are you ever going to fight him back? Welcome, this is Bible Scribe. Thank you for joining me for part 5 of my series of 6 videos on Satan, the identity of Satan. So if you've been with me the whole time, you know that in the overview, the first video, we went through the Bible, a few different common ideas about Satan, and all the different names that are used for Satan, for the devil. We have Lucifer, and we've identified a lot of other names, and that's kind of what we're going through in all these videos, are the different names given or ascribed to Satan or a being like Satan, and talking about the sources where those names came from and what they mean. And so we are continuing that in this, the final of those videos, on the names of, and I'll bring it up for you, the names Azazel, Mastema, and the devil. And so then the final video is the next video. It is the total, completely last video where we will summarize all the information and connect all the names together that need to be connected. So stay tuned for that final 6th video. But in this video, we're going to go ahead and go through Azazel, Mastema, and the devil and discover what those names mean and what they're all about. So, searching for the name Azazel. What do ancient writings say about that? Azazel is actually in the Bible, although it's hard sometimes to find because it is in the Hebrew behind our English translations, and we often, we don't check the Strongs or we don't see that. And so we have in Leviticus 16:10, it says, "But the goat on which the lot fell to be the scapegoat shall be presented alive before the Lord to make an atonement with him, and to let him go for a scapegoat," or the Hebrew says Azazel for that word, "into the wilderness." So that is our mention of Azazel in the Bible. I think it's the only one, but this is describing the annual sacrifice that Aaron, the Levite priest, would do for the sins of the people. And so there were 2 goats, and one goat was sacrificed in the temple for the cleansing of the people, and this other goat, called the scapegoat, but really referred to as this term Azazel, was sent into the wilderness, and a red ribbon was tied around his neck, and that was it was actually symbolic of another type of sin offering to the, essentially, we're going to get into that. I won't go into it specifically, but this is a specific annual sacrifice that Aaron did as the king, priest, Levite priest, and had a special meaning. In the Brown Drivers Briggs book, we have that this is the proper name of a spirit haunting the desert. All right, so let's just take that as a hint. We're going to go forward with that, but we're going to see in other sources some more expletive, helpful information about who Azazel was. And then also in Brown Drivers Briggs, it mentions that this could or possibly means the name of a fallen angel. So that's another clue for us going forward. But we're going to see a lot of information about Azazel. And then this last point, during this sin offering, Aaron would cast lots on the 2 goats, right? Like I mentioned, one was for the sin of Israel, and the one on whom the lot of Azazel was cast would be sent into the wilderness. And it almost, at this point, there's more information we're going to get into, but at this point, it's almost like this one sacrifice was for God, and there was a portion or a sacrifice allotted for the demons or Azazel, right? And it was sent into the wilderness. So let's just keep that in mind as we go. We will learn a lot more. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, all right, in scroll 4Q203, it's actually a fragment from the 4th Qumran cave, but it says the name Azazel occurs in line 6 of 4Q203, the Book of Giants. That's the name they give to this fragment, is a part of the Book of Giants, which is a part of the Enochic literature found in the Qumran caves. And so I put for you here, you can see there's, in the last few lines here, there's brackets with dots, and this is where the fragment of paper they found it on papyrus was unreadable. Like, it is just so deteriorated. It's falling apart. So they get as much as they can. They put it down and they try to translate it, but there's some words they just can't get out. So line 3, the words "your strength," surrounded by some missing fragments, and then line 4 is missing. 5 is "thereupon Oya said to Haya," and then there's something missing. "Then he answered, it is not for us," and this is line 6, "but for Azazel," or Aziel, which is essentially the same in Hebrew. "For he did," missing section, "the children of angels." And then line 7, "are the giants, and they would not let all their loved ones be neglected. We have not been cast down, you have strength." And then it's, missing portions surrounding that. But even from the portions we can see here that there's a connection with Azazel here to the children of angels, or what we might think of in the Bible as the sons of God, and the giants here in line 7, and cast down. There's some sense of either this angel or others being cast down, and this is all in the same segment of text. So definitely some good clues here concerning the fallen angels, the giants, and being cast down from heaven. Now, in the book of Enoch, Azazel is front and center. If you have studied the book of Enoch at all, read the first few chapters, you have seen the name Azazel. And so it was said in chapter 8, verse 1, that Azazel was to have taught men many secret things, that he fell and came down with the angels that had an incursion in Genesis 6, and that they taught men secret things of the heavenly realm that they weren't supposed to. So let's read those verses together. 8:1, "And Azazel taught men to make swords, knives, shields, breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of antimony, and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones and coloring tinctures." Now, just a little side note, you may know this, but even secular scholars have for, as long as I've been alive, I've been hearing them talk about, when they go back in history and they look at things like the Bronze Age and when metals seem to come into existence in the archaeological record, they have zero explanation for why it was so sudden. And they've said that, I've heard that all my life. Oh, the explosion of bronze and metalworking was so sudden, and we don't have an explanation for that. Well, it's funny how when you go back to the Bible or the scriptures, other historical ancient writings, they fill in those blanks for you, right? So the angels apparently came down, and when they took human wives and started doing sin and wickedness upon the earth, one of the things that was done was they taught men how to do some of these things that they weren't supposed to do. Very interesting. 8:2, "And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and were led astray, became corrupt in all their ways." 9:6, in chapter 9 of Enoch, "Thou seest what Azazel hath done, who hath taught all unrighteousness on earth, and revealed the eternal secrets which were preserved in heaven, which men were striving to learn." So again, reiterating that Azazel, if not led this charge, led the teaching of mankind to do things they weren't supposed to do. And just note in your head that harkens back to the Garden of Eden, where the one we see as the serpent, or Satan, tempted Eve by saying, you can know these things. You can have knowledge. That was the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? And so the temptation there is the same, and it seems like this angel, Azazel, and we will get more information on this, but he seemed to do the same type of thing, tempt man with the knowledge that he wasn't supposed to have in the first place. So in chapter 10, verse 4, the book of Enoch, "Again the Lord said to Raphael, bind Azazel hand and foot, cast into the darkness, and make an opening in the desert, which is in Dudael, and cast him therein." Now the desert, remember that was in our reference from the Bible, right? Where they did this scapegoat Azazel ritual for the sacrifice, the annual atonement for the people, and they would send the Azazel scapegoat into the wilderness, into the desert. And so now we have another connection here. In chapter 10, verse 8, and the whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel. To him ascribe all sin. Now, it's very interesting. This is very holistic in saying the whole earth was corrupted by the works of Azazel because he taught the men these things like the art of war, the making of weaponry, the use of dyes and colors in makeup for women. And so all the things that would encourage war or lust or all these different, physical, fleshly desires, they were the things that Azazel brought and encouraged man with. Not that man didn't have that, ability to have these desires on his own, but Azazel came and used that against man. All right? Very interesting. So also in the book of Enoch, there's a vision of the future that Enoch gets later on in the book, chapter 54, in verse 4. And I asked an angel of peace who went with me, saying, for whom are these chains being prepared? And he's talking about Hades. He's in the underworld at this point. And in verse 5, he said unto me, these are being prepared for the hosts of Azazel, that they may take them and cast them into the abyss of complete condemnation. So just recognize that this is future for Enoch. He's seen something that's going to happen. The angel says to him that these chains are all being prepared for the hosts of Azazel, so that they may take them and cast them into the abyss and at complete condemnation. And this last point, that the Lord of spirits may take vengeance on them for their unrighteousness in becoming subject to Satan and leading astray those who dwell on the earth. Well, that's interesting because the Lord of spirits, being God himself, says that he's going to take vengeance on them, meaning the hosts of Azazel, for becoming subject to Satan. Now, to me, that is a connection because it's referring to Satan or Azazel as Satan. In one sentence, in one verse, it says Azazel. In the next, it says they became subject to Satan, meaning the adversary, but they use that term in place of the term Azazel. So to me, this is a confirmation that Azazel may be Satan, the same Satan we've been tracking throughout all these videos, and leading astray the men of the earth, the mankind on the earth. Now, to go to a different source, the Apocalypse of Abraham, another writing that is ancient. We can't know for sure how old, but very interesting stuff in it. So I put the points down of what I saw in that as I read through it. I won't go into reading all of it, but it's the serpent in the garden. This is Azazel, spoken of Azazel in the Apocalypse of Abraham, that he was the serpent in the garden, it says. So that matches him up with Satan in the Garden of Eden. His lot was upon the earth, not in heaven. So because of his sin, obviously cast down to earth, his lot, meaning his command, is only over things in the earth, things under the heavens, not in heaven any longer. God made him, Azazel, a dweller on the earth because of his choice. Every evil spirit of lies is under Azazel, or is listening to Azazel. And through Azazel, wrath and trials for the generations of ungodly men. So ungodly men, it tells that, Azazel being cast down in a overseer of things earthly, that he was to bring wrath and trial upon ungodly men on earth, which makes sense. God has not permitted that the bodies of the righteous should be in your hand. So he has not allotted the righteous to Azazel, but the wicked, that he can tempt and try them and take them down. It's almost like God says, the wicked are yours. You do what you will with them. And he says, the righteous, though, are mine. They are my lot, and you will never have a hand on them. Very interesting. Azazel has scattered over the earth the secrets of heaven. So this Apocalypse of Abraham echoed perfectly what was in the book of Enoch, that Azazel was the one responsible for giving mankind the secrets of heaven that he was not supposed to have. That Azazel rebelled against the Mighty One. The burning coal of the furnace of the earth and the inaccessible parts of the earth was to be his domain. And his heritage was to be over those who were with you. The fallen angels and the Nephilim is the reference from Enoch. So that was his heritage. His people, his hosts, were those fallen angels and the demons of the Nephilim, the giant spirits of the giants after they died, because they all died, or mostly died, in the flood. And so that was his portion, plus the wicked. And it said God had given him power over those who answer him. So in the context there in Apocalypse of Abraham, it's really saying that the humans, mankind, those of mankind that will listen to and ascribe to and do the things of Azazel, that he had power over them. So it helps us understand how things happen on earth, and like why people that go down that path of following after wickedness, or one little sin and then a bigger sin, and they keep choosing to take the bigger road to the works of Azazel. And then God has then at that point given them over to Azazel, because that's his portion. All right. Very interesting, very helpful in understanding how things work. So in the Apocalypse of Abraham also, verse 28, it says, as the number of the stars and their power, so will I make your seed a nation and your people set apart from me as my own inheritance, as distinct from that of Azazel, and yet I include Azazel in my house. This just saying that, God's telling him, my people are totally distinct from yours, Azazel. My people will be set apart. And that he's talking about Israel there. And just to know there, to me, the key was that, God's showing that he apportioned Israel for himself at that time. This was, thousands of years before Christ, or a couple thousand. And then Satan has an ascribed lot, and that is the wicked. But those, in the second point here, those on the right side of the picture there, the people who have been set apart from me, and whom I have ordained to be born of your line and called my people, even some of those who derive from Azazel. So those are the people set apart from me, and whom I have ordained to be born of your line and called my people. So I think what he's saying here is that, the Israelites were apportioned as God's people, but then there's the Gentile nations. And I think that because Azazel had authority over the spirits of the earth, which would have probably included some of the nation principalities of the Gentile nations, that God was telling him that even out of those Gentile nations, I will still call some of your line. I will still call some out, and they will be called my people. So this harkens to the notion in the New Testament and in some of the prophecies in the Old Testament, Isaiah, Jeremiah, that there would be Gentiles included in the nation, in the kingdom of God. And so that makes total sense that, God's saying, I have a portion to myself, you have a portion to yourself, but I'm going to take even some of yours out of the Gentile nations, and I will make them a part of my house. Verse 36 there, and I said, who are these? And this is Abraham saying this to God. Who are these who are embracing? And who is the one between them who is behind the tree? And what is the fruit they are eating? And he said, this is the counsel of the world. This is the one Adam, and this one who is their desire upon the earth is Eve. But he who is between them represents ungodliness and their beginnings on the way to perdition, even Azazel. So this is the verse where it connects Azazel directly to the serpent in the garden. So now we have sources that connect Azazel perfectly with Satan. And so we can deduce from that Azazel and Satan are one and the same being. The last point on here is those who will to do evil, and how much I hate it in those who do it. Over them I gave him, meaning Azazel, power, even to be beloved of them. So just reiterating that idea that those who are evil and wicked and don't turn from their sin, don't turn to God, they turn to Azazel instead, and Azazel is given power over them. whether they know it or not, and this applies even to modern life, whether the wicked know it or not, they are ascribed to Azazel and Satan in this world. Unless they can turn from that and come out and go to God, that they are apportioned to Satan, to Azazel. And that's just how it is. Now, in the Mishnah, and I sometimes get these mixed up. I think the Mishnah is the written down verbal tradition of the Jews, but it talks about the scarlet thread, and this is related to the scapegoat, the Azazel, in the sacrifice that the Jews did annually. And I'll just read this to you. Scarlet thread. The scarlet thread is symbolically referenced in Isaiah 1:18, and the Talmud states that during the 40 years that Simeon was the just and high priest of Israel, the thread actually turned white as soon as the goat was thrown over the precipice, a sign that the sins of the people were forgiven. In later times, the change to white was not invariable, a proof of the people's moral and spiritual deterioration that was gradually on the increase until 40 years before the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD, when the change of color was no longer observed. So, I don't know if you got all that, but what it's saying is that as the priests throughout history did this scapegoat ceremony, they would cast the lot for the scapegoat, and they would sacrifice the other goat for God and God's people, and then the scapegoat would have this red ribbon tied around it, and they actually would lead it into the wilderness and get it to jump off of a precipice, like a cliff, and die in a gorge. And that was how they sacrificed it to Azazel. And so what they noticed over the years was, as the goat was about to go over the edge, every year that the sash, the little red ribbon, would turn white. And that was a sign to the priests. They took it as a sign that God had cleansed their sin, the sin of the people of Israel, because of their sacrifices and their turning to him. But they found, as it came closer and closer to their judgment in 70 AD, within 40 years, after the time of Christ had come, it was exactly the time that they started noticing this red sash on the goat did not turn white anymore. It stayed red. And they saw that as a sign that, they probably tried to ignore it during that time as far as, but they knew it was that the people and the Pharisees and all the priests in general, they were turning from God, and they weren't coming back. And so their sacrifice meant nothing to God. And he didn't give them that sign any longer for the 40 years leading up to AD 70, when God, in that crazy time of the siege of Jerusalem, allowed the destruction of the temple and the complete destruction of the priesthood and the Old Covenant. Very, very amazing how this all connects together, to me at least. Oh my goodness. The sin offering of Leviticus 16 seems to represent sin was ascribed to Azazel, stated in the book of Enoch 10:9. Hence the casting of sin upon the scapegoat, and the sending into the wilderness, which was where Azazel and his host was cast. Azazel taught humans the secrets of angels and the practice and implements of war. Azazel was the serpent in the Garden of Eden, also Satan. So we have that connection. We know that it was the same. So that was the summary for Azazel. Now we're going to go into the name Mastema. Now this name, you're going to see, particularly comes from the book of Jubilees. So let's see what we find out about the name Mastema. So in the book of Jubilees, the name Mastema links directly to Satan. The temptation of Abraham to kill Isaac is one of the places. Like it says, in the Bible it says Satan tempted, but in the book of Jubilees it says Mastema tempted. Both Jubilees, which says Mastema, and Jasher, book of Jasher, says Satan in the same passage, like for the same thing. So now we know that in the book of Jubilees, Mastema is meant for this same being called Satan in other texts, because he does the exact same things in history. Book of Jubilees calls Mastema the chief of spirits. We've heard that term before in other names named for Satan. The prince, he is called the accuser of Israel, that he did accuse Israel in chapter 48:15, and that he commands the demons after the flood. And so And that's a very interesting point, that Mastema had something to do with the demons and the fallen, disembodied spirits of the dead Nephilim after the flood. He was the angel of death that slew the firstborn of the Egyptians. This is a major point that I found out reading through the book of Jubilees that was amazing to me, because the Bible gives little clarification, very little, on the angel of death, or what we call the angel of death, and the spirit that went through and killed all the firstborn of Pharaoh during the 10 plagues, the last of the 10 plagues. But in 49:2 of the book of Jubilees, for on this night, the beginning of the festival and the beginning of the joy, ye were eating the Passover in Egypt, when all the powers of Mastema had been let loose to slay all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh to the firstborn of the captive maidservant in the mill and the cattle. So this is saying that Mastema and his hosts, his angels, wherever we heard that, Satan has a host of angels that work his work, and Mastema's host of angels were sent throughout the land to kill the firstborn of the Egyptian Pharaoh at that time. It just gives us a little more detail, and that's, a lot of times, just as a sidebar, the Bible sometimes summarizes or, makes small mentions of things because it assumes knowledge that is other places, and this is one of those places. So sometimes in the Bible, people will spend years and years studying certain sections of the Bible, but because they never find the sources for where that information came from, they don't have a full understanding. They just go in circles on a epithet, a small thing referring to something much bigger. And so don't let yourself get in that trap. Read the Bible through. Get as much knowledge as you can by rereading portions of Scripture again and again. And then also read other sources to see if you can find out the background information behind what the Bible is saying. Sometimes it will flesh it out in a way you didn't expect, like exactly what we're going through in these videos. The last point here, everything that the Bible credits to Satan in the book of Jubilees gets credited to Mastema. So that to me is a super clue that, definitely is a representation of Satan, that Mastema is a name that Satan shares, and that the book of Jubilees simply uses that name as opposed to the Satan. And in fact, the word Mastema, from what I have read, also means adversary. So it's interesting that it's a synonym of Satan, ha-satan in Hebrew, but means the same thing. It's all the same. So searching for now the term the devil. We hear that term a lot. It's in the New Testament a little bit, and we've seen it there, but people use it all the time, and we're going to see kind of like where that might have come from. So the etymology of the word devil, it comes from seraph or seraphim in the Bible, in Hebrew. And the seraphim were angel beings, and they were one of the highest class of angel beings. And the word seraph relates to the word serpent and the word light or fire. So both ideas, I almost think that they may be one and the same idea, but that these beings were serpent-like, possibly, but definitely fiery. If you ever were in the spiritual realm, in the heavens with them, you would see them as flame of fire that's super bright. And that's just their nature. Then devil, diabolos, and diabolo are all a word meaning an accuser in Greek. And so, again, we have this word that is an attribute picture of the being that it's talking about. And so it's not uncommon. It's the same thing with the Satan, the adversary, which can be a general term, and devil is also used as a general term for demons or devils, unclean spirits, but also as a proper name for the accuser, the one. All right. The late Latin word is from ecclesiastical Greek, diabolos, which in Jewish and Christian use was the devil. It was Satan, and in general use meant accuser and slanderer. It is an agent noun from Greek, diabelin, which means to slander or attack or literally throw across. Anyway, just reiterating that nature of that word, that it is accuser, same as Satan. Matthew 4:1, then Jesus was led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. Now, you know that this is in Matthew, but it's also in the other Gospels, and in this one it says devil, in the others it says Satan. So now we know that the Bible at least considers in many cases devil and Satan to be synonymous. In the parable of the wheat and tares in Matthew 13, verse 39 says, the enemy that sowed them, meaning the seed, is the devil. And the harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. The enemy that sowed them is talking about the tares within the wheat. And so the enemy was the devil that did that. He sowed tares in among the wheat, and that was the children of Israel. So the tares were the evil, the wicked. He sowed inside the children of Israel. And at the time Jesus came, Israel was a mess, and it was full of wickedness. And there were some that were true to God, not many, but then it was a ton of wickedness. So Satan had sowed those tares into the kingdom of Israel. In the Secrets of Enoch, chapter 33, verse 4, the devil is the evil spirit of the lower places. As a fugitive, he made Satana from the heavens, as his name was Satanael. Thus he became different from the angels. But his nature did not change, his intelligence, as far as his understanding of righteous and sinful things. And he understood his condemnation in the sin which he had sinned before. Therefore, he conceived through thought against Adam. In such form he entered and seduced Eve, but did not touch Adam. So again, this is another source that's ancient, probably as, Secrets of Enoch is harder to pin down, and I think it is also called Book of Enoch 2. But again, they don't know how old. It just seems like it's, before Christ. It's old. They can't pin it down because it's so old. Anyway, this is saying the devil is the spirit that was in the garden. He tempted Adam and Eve. He fell from heaven. It reiterates that. And that he lost his kind of first estate in heaven and became a minister on the earth, like of evil, essentially, of temptation towards mankind. And just talking about that he's a spirit of the lower places now. Lower places meaning below the firmament, below the heavens. So everything from the sky downward, including the underworld. In the Discourse on Abaddon, we saw this writing in another one of my videos, specifically on the being Abaddon, which is different, but this writing also mentions the devil. And straightway my father commanded a mighty cherubim, and he smote him, and cast him down from heaven upon the earth, because of his pride. And he broke his wings and his ribs, and made him helpless. And those whom he had brought with him became devils with him. This is talking about the devil. That he was cast down from heaven, and his angels with him. And the serpent himself came at the hour of the evening to receive his food according to wont. For the serpent was like all the other beasts in the Garden of Eden, it's talking about. And he walked upon his feet just as they did. All the beasts in the garden walked upright. And the devil lived nigh unto paradise. He lived nearby there. And he lay in wait for Adam and Eve by day and night. And when he saw Eve by herself, he went into the serpent. So the devil possessed this serpent. The serpent wasn't in and of itself evil. The devil possessed him. And the devil went to meet Adam outside paradise. And he said unto him, Behold, O Adam, I was cast forth from my glory through thee. And behold, I have made thee to be expelled from the paradise of delight, because thou hast caused me to become a stranger in my dwelling place in heaven. Now thou know that I will never cease to contend against thee, and all those who shall come after thee from out of thee, until I have taken them all down to Amente with me. And Amente or Amentet is it's actually an Egyptian word for Hades, for the underworld. And so he's saying to Adam, because, I was cast down because I didn't want to serve you. I didn't want to do what was required of me in regards to you. And because of that, I blame you, Adam, for that. So the devil blames Adam for being cast down from heaven, and then says, because of that, I will contend against you and your generation, your posterity for all generations, and strive to bring them down to Hades. So this tells us the intent of the devil in regards to Adam and all mankind, and we see why he wants and has this station of tempting man and trying to turn him to wickedness, because that's his goal. Bring as many down with him as he can, because he is bitter towards Adam and towards God, because Satan felt he was created first. And that's in another writing we already went through in a different video. In the Gospel of Bartholomew, verse 16, and Beliar, in the Greek says, Slavonic says devil, so Beliar or the devil, says unto Hades, and ... So it just continues, but I wanted to show you there that this connects Beliar, the devil, and it says essentially that they are the same thing. But they talk to Hades, so we know now that the Beliar and the devil are equivalent as far as this text is concerned, and Hades is a different entity. So just to be clear on points, and in our summary video, we're going to go through all these different names and have a little chart of who is who. Verse 17 there, it says, Hades said to death, and death in this context was co-equal with Beliar or the devil from the previous verse. In verse 19 says, allow me to enter into thyself, for of thee I was formed. And this is Hades talking to Beliar or Satan or the devil. So Hades says, allow me to enter into you. And this is after they realize Christ has come into Hades and is busting down the gates and taking the righteous from them in Hades, that he says, he's essentially saying, I want to die. Take me into yourself because you formed me. Apparently, that's the notion here, that the devil or Satan himself formed Hades. I can't speak to that other than that's what it says. I don't find a reference to that particular event where Satan made or created Hades, but that is there, and it echoes in the Secrets of Enoch, chapter 33, verse 4, if you want to look that up and go further with that. So in summary, the devil, the name the devil, it was a name used for Satan in the early Christian church, period. It just was. It doesn't matter how you slice it or whether you want to believe it, but that's what it was. The evil spirit, he was an evil spirit of the lower places, as we read in our texts. And he was smote by God from heaven because of his pride on account of Adam. He didn't want to worship or serve Adam because he was made as the image of God, but the devil felt he was made first and didn't deserve that. The fallen angels of Satan or of the devil also became devils, called devils in different places in the Bible and in other writings. So when you see devils, it's referring to the unclean spirits or hosts of the devil. And he seduced Eve in the garden. The devil's name, the devil, was connected to that same act of seduction of Eve in the garden. And we saw that with Azazel and Satan and Mastema. And now we're starting to see this connection between all these different names. So that is it for this video, part 5 of our 6 parts. And this was the last of all the names and going over the sources for those names and where they come from and what they mean. So in part 6, we're going to see a summary of all the information we've gotten concerning Satan. And that is going to be a great video. It ties everything together and in a brief form so that you can kind of look at it all at once and say, that's how all those things connected. And now that we've gotten all this information on the table, I felt we needed to wrap it up into something that's a little easier to digest, because we've gone over so many different things and made connections all over the place. So that video will wrap it up. Please join me when that video pops. Be ready, like and subscribe, but then you can get the alerts too if you want to get an alert when that video pops. I'll try to do it in the next probably couple days and get it out. So we can finish up this series. But thanks for joining me. This has been such a fun series, so much information, so many good sources here. And God bless you as you search these things out.